Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do my Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and any fun bookish or just fun things that happened during the week. I want to point out that I am wearing my new t-shirt from Good Neighbor Bookstore. You may remember that in the month of May, I ordered a curated book box from them. Really enjoyed that experience. It was the first time I ever did a curated book box. I'll put a link to that video in the description box down below. I had also ordered a t-shirt, but it was part of a bonfire campaign, so it came later, and I'm wearing it today. I think this is going to be a new favorite. Anyway, the big thing going on in the book world is that the Women's Prize will be announced next week on June 15th. And I don't want to do a whole predictions video, but I was looking at the finalists for the prize for this year and just kind of thinking about what I think might happen and what could potentially win. So I guess I have something of a prediction. We'll call it a prediction, but I am just kind of staying out. I like to watch and follow along with the Women's Prize and the Booker for the most part. I try not to really engage in leading the conversation or anything like that because I don't think I'm qualified to do that. I am much better suited to something like the Pulitzer, but I enjoy it, so I follow along. So just really quickly running through the shortlisted titles, they are Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, The Bread the Devil Knead by Lisa Allen-Agostini, The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, and The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. I think it seems likely that it's going to come down to either Great Circle or the Island of Missing Trees. I feel like either one of them would make a solid winner, and I really wouldn't be surprised if either one of them ends up winning. The only one of those two that I have read is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, and I really liked it. I do want to read The Island of Missing Trees. I think if I'm thinking objectively and taking myself out of the equation, it probably would make more sense for Elif Shafak to end up winning. But I'm going to go with my heart on this one because I really did like Great Circle a great deal, and it ended up losing the Booker. It ended up not being even a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. So I would like to see it win something. And for that reason, I'm going to say that I'm going to predict Great Circle. However, I think The Bread the Devil Knead is a serious dark horse contender, so I wouldn't be surprised if that pulls one out. But I have a really bad track record with the Women's Prize. That's why I don't usually make predictions videos, so I'm not at all going to be surprised if Sorrow and Bliss or The Sentence or The Book of Form and Emptiness ends up pulling out a win. I didn't see Piranesi coming last year. So I am just going to be happy for whatever wins. Ultimately, I was not a very big fan of The Sentence. It was my first DNF of this year, but Louise Erdrich is a person who I would like to see win the Women's Prize. Maybe not for that book in particular, but she's definitely someone who is worthy of the prize based on her past work. But I'd love to hear what you think is going to win, what you're rooting for, and your prediction and all of that stuff in the comment section down below. Not much else has been going on. We did finish season 2 of Ted Lasso. We had been watching that. Really, really enjoyed that show a great deal. And I'm looking forward to season 3 whenever they release that. They don't have a date announced yet. I believe it will be sometime later this year. But I really loved that show. And if you haven't watched it, I was staying away because I don't really follow soccer. I don't really follow sports all that much, and I don't tend to like movies and TV shows that are about sports. But this is just a really good show with really great characters. And what I love about it is that ultimately it's about trying to be a good person and what that means and how difficult it can be to try to be a good person. And I really appreciate that. I love that. And I think that's something that Good Neighbor Bookstore would also appreciate, actually. So I would recommend it if you haven't watched it, because I really resisted watching it for a long time. And finally, my neighbors told us that they are not fans of sports or sports-related shows and movies, and they convinced us to watch it. I'm glad they did. Let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video, because I have a lot to talk about. I finished 2 different books this past week, and I have 2 books I have 1 book in progress, let's be honest. I have 1 book in progress and another one that I'm just starting. Let's start with one of the ones that I finished. I was about halfway through Rubyfruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown in my last Friday Reads video, and I finished it on, I think, Sunday. I really loved this book so much. I think it absolutely makes sense that on the back of my edition, which was released in somewhere around 1990, they compare it to Huckleberry Finn, or say Mark Twain. I think this is probably a really good fusion of like Mark Twain crossed with Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe, crossed a little bit with Maurice. I really loved this book, in case you can't tell. And I'm kind of bummed that it took me such a long time to get around to reading it. And I'm glad that I put it on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month. And that was exactly the kick in the pants that I needed to finally get around to reading it. And I would absolutely recommend this book to you. What I really love about it is that it's ultimately a book about being yourself, trying to be yourself. And I don't want to give anything away about the ending, but the protagonist of this book, Molly Bolt, is someone who is confident about who she is and is confident that she's going to be able to find a place for herself in the world as long as she stays true to herself, doesn't listen to what other people want her to do, and just keeps pushing forward. And ultimately, it's about the difficulties of that and how society kind of forces you to compromise. And maybe if you don't compromise, you won't have access to some of the things that you want to do. It's a really interesting book from that perspective. And you see through all of these chapters and vignettes, the chapters are almost like short stories in the beginning. And then the latter part of the book becomes a little bit more of a single story. In the beginning, as she's growing older, each chapter is almost like childhood and then adolescence and then something specifically about high school. And then she gets into college and it kind of moves in that direction. But then in the second half of the book, she goes to New York City and it just follows a storyline for that. So these people that she meets kind of send her on this odyssey of finding out how other people do make compromises and how they live their lives and the things that they sell out about themselves in order to get by and have easier lives, and ways in which they sometimes push back about that, and ways in which people are often extremely hypocritical about the ways in which they live their lives. For instance, this is not a spoiler, it's just a specific example from the first half of the book. When she is in college, she gets in trouble for dating another female student, and she ends up sitting in the office of the dean of female students for her university. And the dean of female students is talking about how disappointed she is in her and how she needs to stay on the straight and narrow and get her life together or else she's not going to have anything. And then Molly Bolt just kind of looks at her and points out, it's like, you know, you've lived with the female English professor from this school for 15 or 20 years at this point. So I don't know where you're coming from with all of this advice. And I love that moment. I didn't really do it justice in that telling, but it's just a great moment. And it shows the ways in which people are very hypocritical about a lot of these issues and judgmental of other people, regardless of how they actually live their own life. I just love this book. I can't say enough good things about it. It's really smart. I loved the ending, but I can't really talk about the ending. It kind of reminded me of Maurice, which is my favorite book. And I'm just so glad that I finally got around to reading this. And if you haven't read Rubyfruit Jungle, check it out. I haven't read anything else by Rita Mae Brown. I only knew her as the lady who wrote cozy mysteries about a cat named Sneaky Pie Brown. Turns out she has done so much more. The About the Author is insane. She has published several books of poems, a translation of 6 medieval Latin plays, 7 novels, and a writer's manual starting from scratch. She has been twice nominated for an Emmy for her scripts I Love Liberty and The Long Hot Summer. Her newest novel, Wish You Were Here, is a mystery written in collaboration with her cat Sneaky Pie Brown and will be published in November 1990. Again, that is tied to when this edition of the book was released. The book was published in, I think, 1973 and has sort of been an underground cult classic ever since, and I really hope more people discover it as time goes on because it's fantastic. The other book that I finished kind of ties in with that, and actually since I'm in my library, I'm going to pull out the original. It's from the author of Dancer from the Dance, Andrew Holleran. So he is also a sort of underground cult classic writer because for a long time LGBTQ books weren't really considered classics. I think that is starting to change. So this is an LGBTQ classic. I am going to link the video where I grapple with this book a little bit, because this is a book that is really difficult to access from a modern perspective, because it's really about the alienation that existed in the 70s underground gay scene in New York City, and how people were partying and sleeping around and lonely during all of that, and how you couldn't really connect with other people because if anyone found out that you were gay, you could lose your job, your family could disown you, you wouldn't be able to find another job, and at the end of the day, you weren't able to get married, and living with someone was a really dangerous thing to do. So it's about all of the dangers and frustrations of that scene, but it is a book that doesn't give you any comfort about it as well. It's a really prickly book, and that can make it a little difficult to access as well. So that's the background for Kingdom of Sand, which is the book that I listened to on audio, and actually this just released this past week in bookstores. And I'm on a journey with this one as well. Ultimately, I decided I do really like Dancer from the Dance, but when I first read it, I really had to spend a lot of time sitting with it and thinking, and it's probably something I'm going to need to do with Kingdom of Sand as well. Part of that is that this book really didn't match the expectations or the wants that I had from this book, and that's a really difficult thing, because a lot of the time you might expect that a book is going to do something and then it doesn't, and that's actually fine. But sometimes it's hard to reconcile what you wanted it to be with what it is if you have some problems with what it is. So what I wanted was sort of, actually, you know what? I'm just going to hold on to Dancer from the Dance because I'm going to talk about it again. I wanted the Kingdom of Sand to be like a modern check-in on the type of, like, it's sort of like a state of where we are in the way that Dancer from the Dance was. I wanted it to be a look at what gay life is now, especially for an older gay man who experienced these things. And actually the protagonist of the Kingdom of Sand could have been like a background character in Dancer from the Dance. He even mentions that he had partied in clubs in New York City in the 70s, so he could very well be part of this scene. And I was really hoping that the book would reflect a lot on everything that happened in between, because this was published in 1977, before the AIDS epidemic happened. And a lot has changed in gay life over that time. Obviously, AIDS was a huge thing. Then there was Don't Ask, Don't Tell, marriage equality, all of the things that have happened in the lifespan of someone who experienced everything from Dancer from the Dance. I wanted that reflected in the Kingdom of Sand. And it kind of is, but not really. So it's hard for me to reconcile that a little bit. And ultimately, what the Kingdom of Sand is about is a really difficult, sustained look at aging, decline, and death. And it's really interesting. It was very difficult for me to read right now because if you follow along, you know, one of my dogs has a brain tumor and he hasn't really been doing great of late. So I have had to struggle a little bit with finding books that fit with where I'm at emotionally and won't stress me out. And actually, last week, we found out that Jamie has a tumor. So actually now I have 2 dogs with tumors, and I'm not going to talk about it because it will upset me, but like she's going to have surgery later this month. So a lot of this book was also difficult because of what's going on in terms of that. And I don't say that for sympathy or anything like that. It's just, it is what it is. And that's why parts of this book were kind of difficult for me right now. I think they would be difficult anyway, even if you didn't have things like that going on. But it's not easy because it really does take a look at different ways of aging and different ways of declining and responses to it. The unnamed protagonist of the book reflects on the decline and death of his mother a lot, the decline and death of his good friend Earl, and his father's decline and death, and things like that. So he's sort of heading on the cusp. He knows that within the next 5 to 10 years, he is going to be in sort of like the danger zone where he will be old and could die at any point. And he's very aware of all of those things. So it's not comforting at all about the topic, and really it shouldn't be. And it does have a lot of interesting things to say. There are some really beautiful lines throughout the book. I kind of wish I had been reading a print version of it so I could note them down. Instead, I was doing the audio, and that, it is what it is. It is a good audio production, by the way, but I just wish that I had the book because there are some really great lines, but it also feels like nothing happens for large parts of the book. It's sort of a book about nothing. And yet it's a book about life, which means it's a book about everything. I hope that makes sense. So I guess the point is I'm ultimately going to have to sit with this book and really process it some more before I really decide where I'm at with it. But I admit there were parts and stretches of this book where I was kind of bored and wondering when it was going to get to the point. And it ultimately, I told myself hang in there because I was convinced that it was going to wrap itself up into a really beautiful, poignant summary of the theme at the end. And it kind of doesn't. Which, on the one hand, is really appropriate for life, because what summary can you have that's going to give you comfort or meaning about death when we don't really know what death is from this side? And on the other hand, I wish it had built to something more. So this is something I'm definitely going to be staying with and processing as time goes on. So those are the two books that I finished. Once I was done with Rubyfruit Jungle, I picked up last night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. I had been thinking that I was going to do Gordo by Jaime Cortez next, and then I realized that with Ma and Me, which I had talked about in my last Friday Reads video, and Rubyfruit Jungle, I was on a lesbian spree, so I figured I would just kind of lean into that and do Last Night at the Telegraph Club, and I'm really glad that I did. So this won the National Book Award for Young People's Literature last year, which is what inspired me to pick it up. And this is a really smart book. And I had misunderstood sort of what this book is about in a way. But this book is really getting around that kind of thwarted expectation. So I thought that this is a book about Lily, who is an Asian American teenager in 1954. She's getting ready to graduate from high school, and she is starting to figure out who she is. And I thought she went to the Telegraph Club, and when she was there, she met another girl who was her own age, who was Caucasian, and that the two of them had a romance. I thought that's what this book was. It turns out it's something a little bit different. So the other girl, Kath, is a student at Lily's high school. And Lily has just found out about the Telegraph Club and had cut out an advertisement from it and is keeping it around. And Kath sees the advertisement. And they end up going to the Telegraph Club together. And it's about Lily's journey finding out about herself, but it's also about the specter of McCarthyism, because as this is taking place, there is a lot of fear of communism and of the Asian community in the United States as well. Her father has his citizenship papers taken away in the beginning of the book. That's not a spoiler. And that actually is on the dust jacket of the book as well. So it's about this sort of uncertain place where her citizenship, her rights as a citizen can be taken away because the government is afraid of who she is as someone of Chinese ancestry, even though she was born in the United States. And that is sort of compared to how her rights can be taken away as someone who doesn't fit the sexual identity that the country would sort of prefer that she follow. And how even in high school, if people find out that she's hanging out with women who like women and going to this lesbian bar, she could end up not getting into college. She has these dreams of going into school. And another thing that this book does really well is its setting. Malinda Lo did a lot of research, and you can actually tell, and not in a way that makes me dissociate from historical fiction, because so many times they just want to show you all the things they researched and fit in historical characters, and it just feels like it doesn't serve the story. And Malinda Lo really makes it organic. You can really get a sense of the time and place. For instance, it's 1954. No one has landed on the moon at this point in the world of this book. And it's difficult to go back and read something that was set before the moon landing because we know it's going to happen. And Malinda Lo really gets you into the headspace. This is the first time I've really thought about what the space race would have looked like before it succeeded. And that's really fascinating as well. So there's just so much really smart going on. And one of the things that I particularly love so far, I think I have about 100 pages left, 140 pages left. So when Lily gets to the Telegraph Club, she feels awkward. And I feel like there's a sort of shorthand that we adopt for storytelling purposes or for timing purposes, where when in stories like this that are sort of coming out stories, coming of age stories, there's a shorthand where when someone meets the one or goes to a place where they would be accepted for who they are, they instantly feel at home. And that can happen. That does happen. But not always, especially when you have spent your whole life up to that point being indoctrinated to think that these things are wrong. So when Lily first goes to the Telegraph Club, she feels uncomfortable. She keeps coming back and becomes more comfortable over time, but she almost feels like she doesn't fit in when she goes there. And that is a very real experience that you don't see reflected in LGBTQ stories a lot. And it felt very relatable to me because even for me, I have a gay father, but I really struggled with the idea of coming out. So when I moved to New York City and started going to gay bars with a friend for the first time, I didn't feel like I belonged. And I was very uncomfortable with that. And it took about a year for me to really start feeling at home in places like that. And like I was meeting people who were like me and things like that. So I thought that was really beautifully done. And I am really looking forward to finishing this book and talking more about it. But I would absolutely recommend this. I think this has been a perfect book for Pride Month. And I would absolutely recommend it. I think it's just so smart. And I can't wait to finish it. So I finished The Kingdom of Sand yesterday. That's what I had been doing on audio. And I was thinking about what I was going to do next. When I did my Pride Month pile of possibilities, which I will link in the description box down below, a lot of people gave very good feedback on The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I had kind of known that they would, but also Joel read this last year. A close friend of ours read it last year, and they both really loved it. So I've always been meaning to read it. So this just felt like a good time to actually do it. So The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune is the next audiobook. Now, I did actually start it yesterday, but it was toward the end of the day. There were a lot of other things going on. So I started the first chapter, and then by the end of the first chapter, I realized I hadn't really properly been paying attention. So my plan is today or this weekend, I'm going to go back to the beginning. It's easy to do since the first chapter is not that long anyway. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning and start over. So technically, I have read the first chapter of this book, but really I need to do it over. I need a do-over on that. And I'm really looking forward to getting into it and getting further into it. And that is everything that's been going on in this past bookish week. I would love to hear what you've been reading, what you've been watching, what you've been loving. If you have thoughts or recommendations based on any of the books that I have been talking about here, I would love to hear it. Talk to me about your Women's Prize predictions as well. As always, I really appreciate your time watching this video, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.